There'll be a test at the end of this
Yeah.
workshop.
You know what? I'll tell you what. Why don't you go?
I'm gonna leave it here.
Why don't you give them to the business chiefs because they probably. Any.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There's a full house here today, and it's exciting to see, especially it seems like there's a lot of energy coming from all of you. We're going to begin the school board workshop for January 23rd on strategic planning. Dr. Shanna?
Thank you, Chair Cahoon, Vice Chair Castillo, Mr. Melendez. Want to thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to present our progress thus far this school year relative to the strategic plan. The strategic plan is in year 5 of 5, and we know that a lot has changed relative to especially Goal 1 and the metrics related to Goal 1. And then, of course, a lot of things that are pandemic related have also impacted the other goals. Nonetheless, we are focused on strategies within these goals that will maximize the progress that we've made and the progress that we continue to make as we move into what will be the next iteration of the county's strategic plan. So with that, we have some phenomenal staff members that have worked very hard on the work preparing for today. But it's not just about today, it's about the work that they're putting in each and every day. And so what I have found with this team, and it's not just those that are in here, but all the folks that are also behind them. And then I don't want to forget the heavy lifting that's done at the schools by our school administrators, our teachers, our support staff, and the work that goes in from them to get this work accomplished. It's a tremendous lift, but everybody works very closely and collaboratively to make sure that it happens. So with that, I would like to go ahead and dive into Goal 1 and introduce our goal leads for Goal 1. They are Dr. Reyes, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Elementary. We have Ms. Henninger, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Middle and K-8, and then the incomparable Dr. Evans, the Assistant Superintendent for High Schools. So I will turn it over to them.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, board. So the academic success goal, we're going to start in slide 4. It is to ensure all students are successful, future-ready graduates through high-quality, standards-based instruction in every classroom, every content, every day. And today we're going to focus on the progress relative to the key metrics. So as we're working toward meeting or exceeding the state average of ELA and math FAST results, we were able to accurately compare district PM1 to PM2 data because we have tested over 95% of our students on both assessments. The chart shows district overall averages and grade level averages. Boys started higher in proficiency in PM1 math with the exception of 8th grade, but PM1 to PM2 growth was higher among boys. Interestingly, while girls started higher in proficiency in PM1 ELA with the exception of grade 4, their PM1 to PM2 growth was inconsistent. It really varied by grade and by gender. If we look at the district overall averages, FAST grades 3 to 10 ELA have increased by 7%, and FAST grades 3 to 8 math have increased by 11%. What what does that mean? Is that really enough? I am sure you're wondering. So some considerations are that each progress monitoring assessment includes end-of-year grade level questions for which the students have not yet been taught. However, unlike many other districts, instead of waiting for the end of the testing window late January, we tested at the front of the window before winter break. What that did for us is get us real-time results earlier and collaborate with the staff on a robust plan to super accelerate students as soon as we returned in January, while others were still yet to test. We are certain this strategy will produce greater proficiency and gains in PM3, and we will share that plan a little bit later in this presentation.
And so board, as we work from a VPK-12 perspective, we do that for a multitude of reasons. So preparing specifically for high school graduation. And so as we know, preparing for high school graduation starts long before students reach their first day of 9th grade. So building a solid foundation in elementary and middle school is critical in the success of our high school students. We have learned as a curriculum team, essentially that one of our best course of actions is to plan while keeping the end goal in mind. One of those such goals, as I mentioned, was our graduation rate. As we know, high school graduation rate is lag data. Our graduation rate for the 22-23 school year was right at 85%. But as we work to increase and even surpass our graduation rates back to our peak achievement of 91%, which we were able to obtain back during the 19-20 school year, which was actually at above the state average of 90% at that time. We have made concerted and intentional efforts of monitoring all of our high school students, not just our at-risk seniors. As of December, our monitoring tool showed that 68% of our 12th grade students are fully on track to meet graduation requirements here at the midway mark. This is actually an increase from our 63% at the same time last year. Of this, 73% of the 12th grade students on track to graduate at this time are female students, while 65% of the students are male students. This actually aligns with the female to male overall student population that's currently enrolled in 12th grade. We attribute increases to our on track to graduate percentages to the laser sharp focus of our school teams, specifically of their monitoring tools as they track with their graduation progress trackers and their 90-day action plans as they work to prepare students for graduation and to become productive citizens. Planning for life after high school also starts long before the senior year. For example, over 3,000 of our 8th grade students are participating in the Junior Achievement Inspire event held at Osceola Heritage Park, and they're actually currently there as we speak. Finding the right career takes time, it takes planning, and it takes exploring throughout all grade levels. Our goal is to help every single student graduate high school with a confirmed plan. And we want that plan focused and centered around our 4 E's, which is enrollment, enlistment, employment, or having that opportunity for exploration. Not only are we making intentional efforts to ensure that our high school students graduate with their cohort, we're also making strategic actions to increase the number of seniors who have post-secondary plans. Currently, 44% of our seniors have met this end-of-year goal, which is an increase of 8% from this time last year. We expect this to continue to increase overall as we utilize our graduation monitoring tracker. Another focus area, and we're on slide 5 at this point, another focus area where we will have achieved an increase in positive momentum is with our acceleration rate. We've achieved positive growth with acceleration by offering robust career and technical education programs, such as digital tool certifications for middle school students, and by ensuring that all of our high school students that are enrolled in a CTE course offering actually take the industry certification exam for that course. Predictive acceleration rate data for the 22-23 school year is expected to be released by April. However, our Survey 5 data currently indicates an increase from our predictive rate of 59% at the same time during the 21-22 school year.
I'm going to take us into the next section regarding science, social studies, and our Zello progress to round out our key metrics before we really roll into what's going to happen now what. In science, we triangulate data that we collect from NWEA as well as mock assessments that have not been conducted yet, as well as other student assessment data to make instructional decisions. The mock assessments in 5th grade and 8th grade are scheduled for the end of February, and the biology assessment is currently in progress now, okay? In social studies, we have civics and US history. Those are our EOC courses. Currently, our current data in civics quarter 2 assessment indicates that 41% predicted proficiency. This is compared to last year's assessment, which was 35%. Now, let's keep in mind too that this is a different cohort of students. It's the same subject, but it's a different group of students. In US history, their semester 1 assessment was a 48% predicted proficiency compared to last year at this time was 37%. Once again, different cohort of students. However, we can see some forward progress with this particular cohort, which is good news. Both mock assessments are scheduled in March, and how those assessments will be utilized moving forward will be discussed in a few later points. Good news about Zello implementation. This program has offered, which we're not in the first year for that, but it's offered us the ability to reimagine how we allow students to explore the various post-secondary pathways, which is very important, and also as evidenced what we saw today with JA Inspire. Zello informs students about careers, colleges, majors, post-secondary pathways, as well as helping to find and locate local and national scholarship opportunities and financial planning. Currently, our goal of reaching 75% of student completion in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade. 8th grade and 12th grade have surpassed that mark, and 5th grade is just 2 percentage points away, but we will continue to work on that goal to reach that goal.
Well, we're certainly proud of this collective work. As Dr. Shanoff said, everyone in the room, in departments, and most definitely boots on ground at the school. Still, we recognize there is much work to be done. As a district team, we triangulated achievement data from PM2, from STAR, from teacher needs assessments, and as well as teacher feedback to create the Osceola Power Up for Success plan. And this will reach student by student, skill by skill. Dr. Evans and Mrs. Henninger will join me in sharing the Power Up plan, which consists of leadership, curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And this is in slide 6. I'll start off with leadership systems, which will support and propel the work in all areas. The Teaching, Leading, and Learning team and REA came together immediately after winter break to lead principals along with school teacher, coaches, and leaders to day-to-day, resulting in individualized 90-day plans to drive instruction in Tier 1, which is our core, as well as interventions and acceleration for those students that are above the average. Assistant superintendents and directors have formed a district professional learning team utilizing research and best practices learned at the AASA Principal Supervisor Academy to maximize principal coaching strategies and leadership moves in a VPK 12 continuum. Principal and APPLTs continue to work on problems of practice and to monitor, and Dr. Clayton and team are working with Solution Tree to recalibrate district PLC expectations and common language.
And so, having established a leadership foundation, our next area of focus is the curriculum, which was informed by our PM2 achievement data. Curriculum unit plans have been revised, including Tier 1 core instruction with a focus on foundational literacy skills and math fluency, spiral review of low scoring standards, and targeted Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. Planning ahead, we are already working on making adjustments for the 24-25 school year first semester progressions. We are cognizant that aligned curriculum must be implemented with strong instruction. Rather than solely depend on 2 school coaches per school to guide all content teachers in the curriculum, the district coordinators, educational specialists, and resource teachers will provide classroom teacher leaders with content previews during the 3rd and 4th quarter at each grade level. As a measure to provide scaffolding support for our teachers with varying levels of experience, instructional math videos are being created to aid teachers and students in understanding content and delivery. Personalized tutoring is occurring throughout the school day, including the highest FLDOE rated Tier 2 adaptive software known as Amira to reinforce the science of reading K-5. Monitoring tools are also individualized to meet the specific needs of students. And tutoring that has been proven effective will continue in targeted schools.
Following the continuous improvement model of plan, do, check, and act, this assessment category is really how do we check that what we're doing is working or not working and make adjustments accordingly. We continue to utilize targeted Tier 1 formative and unit assessments to determine progress and make shifts as necessary. In addition to those Tier 1 assessments used to drive instruction, Tier 2 and Tier 3 resources, which include assessments to monitor progress, are also available and will be in use. This is where I'm going to talk a little bit about mock assessments that we had talked about before, especially with science and social studies, but they are utilized to see how we're doing with all of the standards in an EOC course. Where do we need some additional layers of support and how do we adapt instruction? This is going to be followed by a professional learning team or PLT-led data dig and school-specific action plan. Teams will leave that session, know exactly what class by class, student by student, those students need moving forward and make adjustments accordingly. All resources, interventions, and assessments are provided to them.
So as we've gone through this, you may wonder what is different about this plan than plans in the past. We are reaching classroom teachers directly while engaging school coaches and administrators as a response to varying needs of our instructional staff. In past practice, we would support those coaches and administrators and they would in turn support their teachers. But we're seeing a shift in our employees to also see new coaches that need additional support themselves. So this plan affords us a direct hand right to the classroom teachers in every content, every grade level. While feedback has always been valued, we are operationalizing specific teacher feedback at higher levels within our plan as we adapt the curriculum unit plans. Resources and assessment tools have been written to align and inform teacher moves so that it is more user-friendly. We recognize the need to provide administrators with instructional leadership tools and spaces for them to collaborate so that they can support the good work of classroom teachers and paraprofessionals. As we see a new wave of administrators beginning their journey in leadership, it is really important to really hone in on their instructional leadership and so that they can support their staffs. We are confident that we're executing a strong plan. It will lead to gains, but also it'll lead to proficiency. At this time, we're open to any additional questions or direction from the board.
Thank you. Can I ask you to explain a little bit further on how I liked what you just said, where you're meeting the teachers first before the coach, like, so how are we doing that? How are we implementing that strategy?
So our content coordinators and specialists, DRTs, we are scheduling for each grade level in every school to send a representative by contact. This is not necessarily someone who is a PLT lead or has some kind of formal leadership. This is anyone in that grade level that has a passion for that subject, and we're bringing them together at different locations within the district so that we can do some preview of lessons to really understand the content, not just the delivery. And so those teachers will go back to their PLCs at the school and be able to really say, and this is how we were taught, and this is how I did it in my classroom. So they have a practitioner that they know and trust be able to get this information to them. Previously, the layer was that it would be district, coaches, classroom teachers. Now we of course invite the coach, but we have a classroom teacher representative involved at every level of this plan.
How often is that happening?
For third quarter and fourth quarter.
But how frequently? Like, how often are they previewing?
So it would be per quarter.
So,
So just once per quarter, they're previewing what's
The
coming for that next?
teacher leader, there will be a teacher leader, I'll use third grade for an example. At any elementary school, we would have a day for a third grade ELA leader, a separate day for a third grade math leader, and a separate day for a science leader. And they will come and get the 4 to 6 week plan ahead of time and all of the things that they need to know for planning ahead, all the high yield strategies, the most important content, do some backwards planning from what the assessments are asking for and make sure that we're fully aligned to the full intent of the standards. So it will be a 4 to 6. It is a train the trainer model from the classroom level rather than just the coach level. And so this is a summary of how that is laid out. If you
We'll get
look at
copies.
that. Yeah, actually I have a question.
Oh, you do?
No, you can go, we can.
I'm serious, but I'll wait till you,
Okay, I'm just,
rather than switching, just
Yeah.
finish all yours and then I'll do mine.
maybe that's a good idea, although, okay, I'm back to the original, or to the first slide, slide 4. So it's clear that there is a dip in our graduation rate, even the state average, so it's not necessarily specific to Osceola, but it is a huge difference from the years before. And so I wonder if we have like a root cause, in your opinion, as to what we think some of the main drivers to the dip are. And then as you're giving us or answering some of the questions, even with how you're addressing this, like how does your plan address those specific root causes or overarching root cause of the dip and the graduation rate?
Essentially, I would say it would be a multitude of reasons. Some of the students that have relocated to the area, we're finding they're coming to us at a much lower, having a much higher deficit, whether it's reading abilities, in need of credit recovery, in need of GPA recovery, things of that nature. So I don't know that I can necessarily say a pinpoint to one specific thing, but I will say it's a multitude of just seeing overage students coming to us with greater needs. For example, we're starting to see a large percentage of students 17 years or older coming from other countries who have not been in school, unfortunately, since elementary school in some cases. And so we're making every concerted effort to make sure that we still give them a productive opportunity for being successful. Some of the things that we're doing intentionally that we have done specifically, previously our attention was always at the at-risk senior. That's always our focus, at-risk senior. Well, that's more reactive. We've now kind of taken a step back to become more proactive. In order for us to address that at-risk senior, we have to start essentially the first day of high school, and in some cases with my partners, we start even before they get to high school. So we've been more intentional about how we monitor and track graduation progress starting the very first day of 9th grade. We can identify students who may have been at risk if they came to us from our middle school partners with a 2.0 GPA. that's a student in our eyes at high school who's already considered at risk. So we're making concerted efforts to address their needs earlier rather than waiting to their senior year to be at risk.
Would you,
I was just gonna say, I almost wonder, is there a way, like, when I think about kids and I think about what they like tune into, and you think about like gaming, for instance, is there a way to have like a leaderboard that they have, like a dashboard that kind of visually shows, or do we have that already, that shows them you've gotten this out of this, or you need this much more of volunteer, you know, like, I don't know, I'm just thinking, how
From a
can we
student
engage
perspective.
students to take ownership of this?
as
So-
parents?
So,
Yeah, it'd be easy for parents too, especially those ones that are coming from other countries maybe and have to see, this is, okay, this is the menu of what we need to fill in.
right, so,
Yeah.
so every kid essentially has a tracker that they are, so the schools utilize the tracking system, and the students are able to see their progress along that route. What we don't have is, say, something that like literally looks like a dashboard.
Yeah.
Where the student would look in and they'd be able to see how far their progress is towards the end. We don't have that. Is that something that we would like to look at maybe moving forward? Absolutely. There are educational partners that use that. So when you go to Main Street, Main Street is a place where we send a lot of our students, as long as the seats are available, to really accelerate the credit recovery, especially if they're overaged. And we're limited by the number of seats that Main Street provides. But basically, the software program that Main Street uses in order to do credit recovery has that dashboard actually built in. So then the students, as they complete the courses, they actually can see their progress towards the end. And for many of them, it is very motivational for them to go ahead and keep going and propel themselves. It is a well-known tool in the credit recovery market. It's not necessarily a tool that is known to be used for the general population of student. I think, though, however, Dr. Evans has hit on something very important, and that is that the tracking of students, and when we talk about tracking of students, we're talking about students empowered to see their own data and their own progress, starts after the first semester of freshman year. So then they know where they are relative to where they need to be, and guidance can intervene as necessary to make sure that those students, those parents, are actively involved in what needs to happen moving forward. Because once we see that gap start to exist, that gap doesn't really close. It just gets wider.
Yeah.
The concern that Dr. Evans brought up regarding overaged students coming in that haven't been in school for many years is a real problem. And in many conversations I've had with Dr. Evans and our school principals, there's a feeling of helplessness, kind of knowing that mathematically we're just kind of out of time. There's no way for them to graduate with their cohort, which is why part of the research that we're doing is looking for those pathways where students can get that additional time, get those credits completed, and get a high school diploma, so then they can still have all the same options as anybody else that's graduating, say, on time with their high school diploma.
If I can continue on the same lines of like the cohort and micro data, you just quoted that there's students that are coming to us from different countries or perhaps different places in the world who may not have, I guess, a skill set to be able to be competitive in our school district. I don't know how else to say it. Do we know what percentage of students that we have coming in are those kinds of students? I'm considering them transient students. Is that the right word? And if so, like what is a transient student? Is it a student that comes from a different country and is here for a couple of weeks? Like what does that mean? That's something that I would like to know, and what percentage of our entire student population is specifically those kinds of students with those specific needs. Because I wonder if that's, I mean, I know that's just part of the story. I wonder what else is at play. I wouldn't want to over rely on that specific population of students, because it seems like there's other things at play as well that we can probably focus on. Another thing, I appreciate when you were talking about data, separating it by gender, because I'm specifically interested in that, as you know. And it seems like there's a huge disconnect, almost a 10% difference between and help me understand, maybe I don't have this number correctly, 73% of our female students are on track to graduate versus 65% of our male students. Is that historical? Is that normally what we're looking at?
Yes, ma'am. So when you look at the number of total students in our senior class, right now we're looking at 6,664.
Okay.
There's actually more females in that class.
Oh, okay.
So it's a higher number.
So it's not that there's 73% of all male or all females, or it's just 73% of the graduating class will be female versus 63%. Okay.
Yes.
My question is there a disparity within those genders of graduation? So do we have more students that are male that are at risk of not graduating versus female students?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, based on the sheer numbers, yes.
Yes.
So,
But is that because of the population, or is that because that is an actual statistic? What's a real word? MBA. What's the word I'm looking for?
I mean, I don't think that you can necessarily pinpoint gender without having multiple covariates involved.
Mhm.
I think that there are probably other predictors that are probably more strongly aligned to being off track to graduate than gender. However, I think that there's probably enough data anecdotally. I've gone to a couple of these at-risk meetings, and they are overly. You see the male population
That's the word I was looking for.
overrepresented in these meetings, and so it is striking, and certainly as a former high school principal, when we held these meetings, it was very much the same way. It doesn't change though the intentionality that comes with what do we need to do to get you across the stage. We don't necessarily have a separate plan for, say, the boys
I was gonna ask
versus
that. I was gonna ask
versus
that.
the
What is,
girls.
if we're I mean, I know when we look at, so we'd say we look at language, obviously there's strategies that are built around that.
Right.
But when we're looking at gender specifically, what is the strategy, do we have one, and what
And
is it?
should we have one? Because I think even the state, we have had this discussion, so it's not like the state thinks that this is an issue. They had a whole task force last year specifically studying the disparity with boys, gentlemen being overrepresented when it comes to underperforming academically. So this is probably not a conversation for this because it's too nuanced, but it is something that I know even at the state level they're worried about.
If I can add to the conversation, really it's about the conditions for learning.
Okay.
And certain perceptions and behaviors that occur differently between boys and girls, just generalizing because there's always differences, right? So one way that we address this is one, calling it out.
Okay.
Saying, let's look at who's getting to answer, who's not getting to answer, what behaviors get us to believe that this child can do more or not, what can we get them involved? And so our district has worked really hard to really be an avid district, to provide those conditions for learning in the classroom to get the best out of all. We've clearly not arrived, but I was with Dr. Evans when she pulled up that data, and I will tell you, it is not tit for tat, and there is a discrepancy for sure. Right? However, when you look at total enrollment, it's not that we're 50% girls, 50% boys, and out of all graduation candidates, there's 73 females.
Right.
So it's not that far of a disparity,
Okay.
if that helps.
Okay. Thank you. When you say conditions for learning, is that just like how we're creating a classroom that's inclusive for everybody to participate? Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We'll add that to the.
Well,
I don't wanna-
from now,
I don't wanna
there's so many
I just wanted to be
other.
a gentleman and allow you to finish before I do my series of questions. So, but that was actually the very first question I asked too, because, it's like, why were graduations going down? Because we can say, okay, this is what we're doing, but if the reasons for that deficiency aren't addressed, then you could be correcting something that's not really the problem. And I think one of the biggest differentials when we redo our strategic plan, which I've been speaking with the board and also Dr. Shanoff, is not just identifying the object, but having key performance measures and tasks associated for that. So we can say, okay, you know, I don't know, you guys tell me, you're the experts, like, what are the reasons why that people don't graduate? And really think about that and say, is it because they're not doing good in algebra or they're, you know, from out of school zones? Okay, then put tasks associated with it to start measuring it, because that is important. You know, that is a valuable thing that you said. You know, if they're not even in the country, then how the heck can we graduate them? But then that needs to be like a footnote in the future strategic plan to say, okay, we're at 85% graduation rate, but 10% of the graduating students came from another country the next year. So it is not to excuse anybody, but it just, reality is reality, you know? So, because what if we get so far below, I'm just making up a theoretical example. Let's say we get so far below and the state of Florida comes up and says, why is our graduation rate so scarily low? Because 20% of them had an earthquake in Guatemala and they came here.
Yeah.
So we have a justification for it. And so that way the state can even penalize us or hold us accountable for what we can control.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally concur with the idea that that the KPIs should have corresponding strategies for which we can actually speak to. There should be data related to those specific strategies that actually feed into what that KPI is. So
And we don't have to be so perfectly predictive too. It's like you said, like maybe you don't know if it's this particular, I mean, put that aside in the students that we have. What is the reason? But if we measure 4 or 5 things, let the data tell us what's the reason why they're not succeeding. We don't have to try to predict what's the cause. Track something, and then you see it not meeting that benchmark, and then you're like, well, wait a second, maybe that's the real reason why they're not graduating.
For sure, and look, we can even look at 4-year cohort graduation rates. So students that actually start as freshmen within our school system, and graduate 4 years later. What does that graduation rate look like?
Absolutely.
And do we start to see, we can even dive even deeper looking at, well, is it after 9th grade that we start to see the divide? Is it after 10th where we start to see kids that are off track? Maybe it's 11th. And what is it that's keeping them off track? You know, for a lot of our students, it's not about GPA. It's about they haven't fulfilled their test scores. And so you have to have 24 credits, you have to have a 2.0. If that's all we were required to do, our graduation rate would be significantly higher. But we have these test scores that we need to achieve as well. And so if that's something where we need to invest a lot of our resources in test preparation, in really getting very mechanical about making sure that the students go on Saturday when they have an SAT administration or an ACT administration. These are things that we will build out. They're systems that we will build out, because the more often the kids actually get the opportunity to take the exams, the more likely they are to pass. The problem is that we may register a kid 9 times for a Saturday administration, but they show up once.
And so, with that in mind, one thing that I'd like us to explore as we're moving into our next strategic plan, and it's something that I've been talking about forever, I think we all been talking about this, is we can only do so much within the school. If a child gets home and they do not have the conditions for learning, using my words here, at home, then the work isn't going to, it's going to be a lot harder for the student, for us, for everybody. So I wonder, as we're thinking about the next iteration of our strategic plan, if we can embed possibly a key performance indicator for community and parents or caretakers in there, so they can be our partners in this. Because we can't, there's just no way that we can do everything within the school district. Parents have to be accountable as well, in my opinion. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but that partnership needs to exist.
I couldn't agree more, and so it will be the board's decision on where we land relative to what the goals are going to be, those big rocks. And so if parent engagement and parent involvement becomes one of those, I think it could be very
But I
powerful
think we
for us.
have parent engagement and community involvement, I think is what we call it, but it's in a different place. I mean, embedding it into like academic success does not mean just teachers. It means how are we going to engage parents to be able to be part of this process as well.
To the extent that you can correlate parent involvement as a metric and what that would look like as a metric. Then
A simple example, I'm not done with my questions,
Yeah,
but to tie in.
Sorry,
We'll let you go
I
back
talk
to-
a lot.
we'll let you
I'm
go back to
sorry.
your questions.
That's okay.
But that's something that we can definitely do when we retreat for a strategic plan. We can talk through what that KPI would be.
Yeah, one simple KPI on that thought process can be like, like I remember when my son was in elementary school, we had to sign the agenda at homework every day. So maybe there can be an electronic thing, hey, did you sign the, you see the homework, you signed it? Or every time you get a report card, they have to say, I acknowledge receipt of the report card, and do you request a teacher conference? So we can say, okay, if all the report cards that went out, either the parent ignored it, or the parent said yes, they want a parent conference, or they said yes, and they were just happy. So in a way, you can kind of see what level of involvement they are, and that's a very measurable item. Is a checkbox on there that says, hey, did you receive the report card? Yes. Are you happy? And if you're not happy, you want a parent-teacher conference. And that way, it's empirical data to see how many parents saw it and didn't return it back. So.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why we decided to go with the printed report card, was the idea that we don't have a lot of parents that are regularly logging into Focus. So if we're asking parents to go through additional steps just to get to their kids' grades, that a lot of parents are just not going to. They don't have the time or they don't know how. So that's why we decided that we were going to actually create that for them and make it easy. So then now you can see it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, try to go real quick now. Now, the state average, because I like to look at that. When we look at the ELA scores and the math scores, I know the PM2 window is still open because we said we wanted to front load it, so that way we can get the results quicker, we can make adjustments, at the beginning of the school year. But I would like to see the PM1 updated then. And then when we do PM3, the PM2. Because when we compare what we do versus a district, that's internal. Like if, let's say systemically internally, I'm not saying we do, but I say there is a systemic problem internally, we won't know unless we see how it is district-wide, statewide. So I kind of want to see how we're doing compared to the state.
So, yes, here's the concern. When we talk about that makes sense for PM3. What concerns me is the fact that these windows are so broad, and especially with PM2,
Right.
You're talking about you've had 4 months of school out of a 9-month year. We decided to test in month 4, whereas other school districts decided to test in month 5. 20% more instruction towards end of the year goals is going to skew PM2 data. I think that we need to utilize progress monitoring data for exactly what it's supposed to be, which is looking at an individual student's progress from PM1 to PM2 and the predictive value of PM2 to how they're going to do on PM3 and remediate for that particular child. I don't know whether or not the aggregated numbers are really going to produce anything that is truly comparable for us, nor is it really in place for what we need. PM3 is the only thing that matters at the end of the day.
Because that's one that the school grades are calculated
Correct.
based off of.
Correct. So when we look at progress for students, we wanted that data early so then we could actually see where we needed to intervene after what was actually supposed to be taught but not learned,
Right.
so that we can get ahead of that.
Now, I guess I got the two simple questions and one more difficult one. The simple one is the civics EOC, is that the one that's in middle school, not the high school, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then US history, is that taken in middle school or high school?
High school.
High school.
It's high school, okay. The thing I would like to look at a little bit more, because now that I've been really visiting some of the schools and I'm still having an issue with if a student is having difficulty in their subject area. I know ideally the teacher's supposed to be the greatest teacher in the world. Sometimes they don't have a certified teacher in that classroom, just being honest. And if they get behind, it's that intervention, how do we catch them up? Are we pulling them out from a class? Or another thing that we talked about earlier is tutoring, which is gonna be on the agenda tonight. Now, to me, I think it'd be interesting to look at what is the tutoring utilization rate. And what I mean by that is, we could look at the lowest quartile of performing students, let's just as a starting point. And we can look at that population of students, let's say the 2,000 students that are in the lowest quartile. We should at least offer them tutoring and then start tracking why they're not. Is it transportation? Because they can't do it after school? They can't, because I just think that if somebody's struggling, the class got, especially in high school, you only got 50 minutes. By the time they take attendance, teach the class, they're gone. Boom. What are you going to take them out of? Are they going to get rid of their electives? We were at an event yesterday where we talked about electives and the arts are fun. That's what keeps them going. So you don't want to take away their electives to get them to remediate. So at some point, I think tutoring, I don't know, I think you have to measure that. Are we offering it to everyone? Are we offering it and are they declining it? And then why are they declining it? And if there's enough people being declined at one point, then maybe we have to get one of those small little shuttle buses to give them a ride back. I don't know, I'm coming to too quick a conclusion. But the point is that I think that when students are struggling, the traditional classroom isn't working for them. Because if it was working, they wouldn't be struggling. So I'm not here to point fingers. I'm just here to say very bluntly, the traditional curriculum isn't working for X number of students. What are we doing? And I think tutoring plan has to be a part of that. And so I think you get the point.
We agree. But there's something that we need to we really need to address, and that is you can't tier 2 and tier 3 intervene your way out of tier 1. So what we need to do is we need to strengthen our supports for our teachers around tier 1 instruction. So then the teachers can intervene during tier 1 instruction and be able to meet the needs of all learners in tier 1 instruction. So then our teachers can feel successful, our kids can be successful, because I'll be honest with you, after school tutoring, after a kid has already been in school for 6 hours, you're already at a point of diminishing returns. After a teacher has been teaching 7.5 hours, you're already at a point of diminishing returns. I know how I am after 7.5 hours. It ain't pretty. So I have to say that I think you're right. We really need to study where the impact of tutoring can be maximized. Because you're never going to not have tutoring. You have to have tutoring because there are instances in which it works. We have data that actually shows that there are specific tutoring strategies that are actually really working for our kids. And then we have data that shows that maybe some things are not. But we need to really focus on the tier 1, which is why I think what Dr. Clayton has presented with Power Up, we're really focusing in on getting better at tier 1. Because we know that we have the kids fresh at tier 1, where we may not necessarily have them fresh at tier 2 and tier 3.
And I guess the last thing is, now is the PLCs, and forgive me if I'm being a little naive here, is that what the Wednesdays were for structure? Is that the reason why we have an early release on Wednesdays? Because we're supposed to get together and kind of accumulate that data that's been throughout the week and say, oh, folks, this is when. Just tell me what PLCs are and how they work, and what is the purpose of that Wednesday? And that way, it's a uniform strategy. Everyone should be understanding what that means.
And it will look a little different at each level, and it will look a little different on each Wednesday, depending on if it's a content Wednesday in secondary or if it's a grade level focus for that particular Wednesday or if it's a whole faculty focus for the Wednesday. But yes, PLC work is looking at where are our kids performing, what did they get, what did they not get, what do we need to do to plan for instruction, what adjustments do we need to make for intervening or tutoring for what they didn't get so that we are reteaching and we enrich for the kids that did get it, and then we move on, which is the whole purpose of the formative assessments, to inform instruction, not to be a grade, and so forth and so on. So all of those things are being adapted for second semester for teachers to be even more laser focused without all of the extra, as well as what you heard them talk about, the solution tree partnership that we're getting ready to re-engage in, to reignite our PLC focus from a district-wide lens, district-wide leadership down to principals, assistant principals, coaches, down to the individual schools to help reignite that systematic structure.
And as a follow-up, do we aggregate the data that was accumulated throughout the year and do like an annual like professional development assessment to say, okay, these were the trends that happened throughout the year, and kind of summarize it and say, hey, this is how we did, and is there like a cumulative training at the end of the year? And you know what I'm trying to say, kind of aggregating everything that happened throughout the year, because sometimes things happen in February, you kind of forgot about it, then at the end of the year, you have the
We
data to
have
say, hey,
so
this is what
much
happened.
data that we're looking at and adjusting to. We're looking at content data. We are looking at the intervention data. It's on all different levels, and participation in professional learning.
Yeah, I think I know what you're asking, and I think that there's probably an opportunity to capture some perception data relative to what was considered to be most useful versus what wasn't as useful. And I think that that's something we can definitely look at. I'm sure that we've got it somewhere, but definitely pulling that out and being able to provide that, and then use that as a means to create the next PD calendar for the
And that best strategy can be transferred from one school to another. Because if that PLC is always in the silo of that school, or what if, I don't know, Kissimmee Elementary figured out a way to teach fractions phenomenally? I'm just making it up, right?
Yeah.
They're just the fraction kings and queens out there. Man, I think the rest of the school district should, at the end of that annual PLC, so to speak, should say, hey, we unlocked the key to fractions.
showcase.
Yeah.
I
So there don't always have to be a negative
I
perception.
can add to that, we actually have built that into leadership already. So we have principal PLTs and assistant principal PLTs, and they alternate going to different campuses, looking at those best practices, deciding on what kind of feedback would we give, what are some nuggets to steal. And what's really exciting is that they've really taken that on their own, and they've built their own cadre of coaches into a PLC, helping each other out. Thus, I would highlight the Poinciana area with COA, Deerwood, Sunrise. I mean, they have really worked together. Each PLT, and my partners could say the same at their levels, have decided on a problem of practice that they want to solve working together. And so that's what they do. They look for what are answers that you have locked in your place that you can share with me, and here's the ones that we have. So that is already happening at our school district. It's very exciting.
That's it for goal 1.
I know.
This is the most important one.
Yeah, that's the most important goal.
So really appreciate goal leads. Thank you very much for your presentation, board members. The questions were excellent. Really appreciate the insight, because I actually think that as these types of discussions go, this was really in depth for a goal 1. So I'm pumped up. All right, thank you. Goal 2.